of course, capitalism has always had ups and downs. I mean, this is among economists known as business cycles. So, economy goes up and down, but the kind of big crisis that we are experiencing at the moment is something different. I mean, we had the Great Depression in 1929. We have this the crisis, which is in some respects actually worse than the Great Depression, because even though I mean the downturn has not been as severe as in the case of Great Depression, it's longer, it's lasting longer. I mean we are, I mean, 4 years after the crisis, and we are still not recovering. So the crisis is unique in that sense. Now, the point I want to make is that this is not inevitable, because there was a time between, say, 1945 and 1975 when there was no crisis of this kind. I mean, of course, even at the time there was ups and downs, but not a big financial crisis of this nature. And that was because the financial markets were better regulated. Unfortunately, in the last 3 decades, we have seen constant deregulation of the financial market, which has created a lot of bubbles and created many financial crises. I mean, of course, we are going through the biggest one now, but starting with 1980s third world debt crisis, the 1995 Mexican peso crisis, and 1997 Asian crisis, 1998 Brazilian crisis, Russian crisis, and 2001 and 2 Argentinian crisis. So we've seen many crises. And all of this is because we have decided not to regulate the financial market. And we are unfortunately paying the price. Actually, it's worse than that, because the people who have created this crisis are not really paying the price. It's ordinary citizens who suffer from welfare cuts. And, I mean, in Italy, I've seen that there are many cases of suicide, people driven by this economic crisis. So we are in a really unfortunate situation. Now, of course, a lot of people will still tell you that, well, capitalism works the best if it's unregulated. But I think the evidence is now clear that we have to regulate it. And in that sense, my theoretical point about that there really being no free market comes in very useful, because when I say, oh, there is no such thing as a free market, as I do in the first chapter of my book, a lot of people get surprised. I mean, they say, okay, I mean, some people like the free market, other people don't like the free market, but we know what a free market is when we see one. But my point is actually we don't, because to explain this, I give this example of child labor, which was very widespread in Europe in the 19th century. So in 1819, some politicians in the British Parliament tried to regulate child labor by banning the employment of very young children, children below 9. So it was a very basic law by the standard of our time. And it said that the older children above 10, can work, but only 12 hours a day. Now, today, a lot of people find this regulation absurd, but at the time, a lot of people were against it, because they said this law is undermining the foundation of the free market, because it's restricting the freedom of contract. The free market economists like to tell you that, oh, there is this great scientific principle called economics, which will tell you what to regulate, what not to regulate. No, it's not like that. It's a political decision. So the fact that 30 years ago, starting with Britain and the United States, we started deregulating our financial market, and as a result gave more and more power to people who have financial resources to invest, was a political decision. So there's nothing wrong with the rest of the society now saying, well, this the free market capitalism, this financial deregulation in the last 3 decades, it hasn't really worked. We need to change that. And I think this crisis is really giving us that strong message. Yes, in the last 10, 20 years, people started talking about the knowledge economy, and people who make that argument try to argue that, well, unlike in the old days when making things, that is manufacturing things, was the source of wealth, today knowledge is the source of wealth. So we really don't need a manufacturing industry. We can export financial services, we can export the engineering services, and we don't really need factories to make things. Now, this argument has become quite widespread, and a lot of governments have bought into it, and they, in the last 10, 20 years, have tried to increase the production of knowledge, at least according to that theory, by putting more and more people into universities. Now, my argument is that knowledge has always been the source of power, the economic power. It's exactly because they had superior technical knowledge that the British, in the late 18th century, started what is known as the Industrial Revolution and became the strongest economic nation in the world. It is exactly because the Americans acquired superior economic knowledge that they became the strongest country, kind of beating Britain in the late 19th, early 20th century. So we have, in that sense, always lived in a knowledge economy. I mean, it's not as if in the old days people were just doing things without knowing anything. No, I mean, the whole point of Industrial Revolution, the whole point of the rise of the United States as the economic superpower was that they acquired superior knowledge to produce new things, to find new ways of doing things. So, by saying, criticizing this the theory of knowledge economy, I don't mean to suggest that knowledge is not important. Of course, it is the most important thing in the end. Yeah? But this view that you can neatly separate knowledge from production activities is quite misleading, because a lot of our technologies are developed through the production process. Of course, there are some very specialized companies that produce only knowledge, in the sense that, say, you might be a small high-tech company in Cambridge, England, which designs a specialized microchip, and the chip is made in, say, Malaysia or Korea. You know? So you have that kind of companies, but they are in a small minority. Most productive knowledge, most new technologies actually generated by companies actually making things. So in that sense, it's very problematic to separate knowledge from production. And that is really my main problem with this theory of knowledge economy. I'm not, by criticizing it, trying to suggest that knowledge is unimportant, because in the end, that is the most important thing.